मैडम आप एक सेकंड की बात कर रहे हैं या वीडियो ही नहीं बनाई अभी?
मेरे तो 6
रिकॉर्डेड हो
सेकंड
रहा है
कम
आप
पड़
लोगों
गए
का।
हैं। 6 सेकंड
रिकॉर्डेड हो रहा है, रिकॉर्डेड हो रहा है।
रिकॉर्डिंग चालू होगी सर।
रिकॉर्डिंग चालू हो गई?
अभी नहीं शुरू है, अभी नहीं शुरू है। जब उन लोग लेक्चर लेते हैं तब रिकॉर्डिंग शुरू होती है।
हाँ
नहीं शुरू हो गया रिकॉर्डिंग शुरू हो गया।
जब तक हमें कोई रोके नहीं हम
प्लीज बी ऑन
नहीं
म्यूट नाउ। Yes, sir.
Good morning, sir.
Yes, sir.
I'm very nice.
गुड मॉर्निंग
Good morning, sir. Good morning,
गुड मॉर्निंग सर।
गुड मॉर्निंग सर।
Good
गुड मॉर्निंग
Good morning, sir.
गुड मॉर्निंग सर।
गुड मॉर्निंग सर।
Good morning, sir.
Good morning, sir.
गुड मॉर्निंग सर।
गुड मॉर्निंग सर।
morning, sir.
गुड मॉर्निंग सर।
Everybody,
Good morning, sir.
गुड मॉर्निंग सर।
everybody go on mute, please.
गुड मॉर्निंग सर। गुड मॉर्निंग सर।
गुड मॉर्निंग सर।
गुड मॉर्निंग सर।
गुड मॉर्निंग सर।
Good morning. I welcome you all to this first session on your Friday morning. This is ये क्या है इसमें? Today's talk is based on who can become a research guide or a research supervisor. Before talking to you about this subject, I should just make a few points for you to follow later in the subsequent slides. First of all, when we translate something from one to other language, we should be bilingual at least. That is, we should be well versed in both the languages where we are translating one from the other. Because if we do not know both the languages to translate and to be translated, there may be a wrong signal, a wrong translation that is conveyed to the participant or to the audience. I should tell you, is there anyone who does not understand the Hindi or Urdu or Hindustani language? Can everybody listen?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes sir।
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Sir,
Yes
Is
sir।
there-
I want to teach in English also. I do not understand Hindi.
Okay, that's why I was just
हिंदुस्तान में रहने वाले हिंदी जानते हैं।
you could enjoy if you are bilingual, because translation means you should be well versed in both the languages I told you in the beginning.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
This is one of the examples that I could tell you right now, that you would have heard this word buzdil, and everybody knows buzdil means darpok. Have you ever come across this word?
Yes, sir.
Yes sir।
Buzdil means darpok. I know in one of the classes in languages, the teacher asked a student, what is the meaning of buzdil? He said darpok. That was the right answer. And still we know that buzdil means darpok. Then the teacher asked him to separate the two words. What is the meaning of buz and what is the meaning of dil? He said buz mane dar, dil mane pok. Now you can understand that if you do not know both the words in the language, buz is a word in Persian, which means bakri, goat, and dil mane heart, which means if you have a very weak heart, you are a very weak person. You are just like darpok, like a goat. If you know both the words in the language, you could translate it probably suitably and could also understand. So bush means bakri or goat, dil means heart, which means that a person who has a weak heart or heart like a goat is a weak person. So similarly, there is one plant you all know, money plant. Money plant does not mean that you have a tree which grows money. It's a plant named money plant. Similarly, if I say steel plant, it is not a plant of steel. It's a factory of steel. Likewise, when we translate or when we read the things, we should know what we are reading and how to translate it or how to understand it in the heart. This is very essential for all people, irrespective of the subject. But it is a literal word that everybody should know. Not only this word, but the scientific translations to understand it. Although the language is very, very simple. In every scientific journal, the language is lucid and such that everybody can understand. There should not be two meanings. There should be only one meaning. What I want to convey, if you understand, then I have conveyed my words. This is what I wanted to tell you in the beginning. However, there are certain rules for becoming a research guide, although to become a research guide is akin to become a professor. How you can become a professor, you know, because you became the teacher in the beginning, and the next academic promotion is that of a professor. These are ranking, but basically we are all teachers, and professor word is a French word which means teacher. So it's a ranking or promotion from assistant to associate and then professor, which means that you have the same qualification as a professor, but you do not have that much experience. So what is essential? That you should have good experience, good understanding, and also good knowledge of the subject, which grows with passage of time. Now, there is another word, interpretation and observation. This interpretation and observation is based on your experimentation or in anything that you make observation. Like something is cold, something is hot. You can do the experiment with your hand by touching it from your sense that something is hot, something is cold. So you can differentiate between a cold material or cold liquid and a hot liquid like coffee and ice cream. It is your sense and it is your interpretation that why it is cold, why it is hot. It is the difference of only temperature. So it is the inference that hot and cold are the two things which can become cold and which can become hot. On keeping it for some time, the cold becomes normal and then hot, depending on the temperature. So this is the observation that you have to make when you do research work or when you do some experiment. Otherwise, hard work and honesty is the best policy for doing any work, and especially in research.
एक्चुअली में सर थोड़ा कैमरा पीछे कर लीजिए, थोड़ा चेहरा पूरा दिखाई दे जाए आपका. हाँ, आप सही सर.
हमारे चेहरे से आप देख रहे हैं या हमारी आवाज से देख रहे हैं?
नहीं सर, दोनों में अच्छा कॉम्बिनेशन हो जाएगा तो और अच्छा समझेंगे.
अच्छा कॉम्बिनेशन अच्छी सूरत से हो रहा है. Okay. Now, then we have imagination, then hypothesis, then theory, and their work or their experience and evidences. So practical evidence is essential in scientific research, or even in literal research in subjects like political science and linguistics. It is essential that you make the observation and make your imagination, which becomes hypothesis, and later it becomes theory when it is supplemented by experimental evidences. I hope you can follow these things later in the subsequent slides. You should have working skill, which means you should be able to present yourself as a research student or a research teacher, research guide, or a supervisor, depending on your work, your specialty, and with your approach to the work. When we talk about the scientist, we go to the best one. In physics, we have Rutherford. In chemistry, we have Pauling. Again, there is something common to both mathematics, physics, like Schrödinger, Heisenberg, de Broglie, Einstein, Bose, Nadlikar, Bhabha, Khurana, C.V. Raman, Louis Pasteur, Al-Biruni, Ibn Sina, Jabir ibn Ayyan. There are so many people, so many workers. When we talk about it, we always mention that these are the workers in the area of research, especially in given subject. Somebody has specialized in physics, somebody has specialized in optics, someone has done something important in biology, someone in medicine. So these are the areas where people have specialized depending on their interest and availability of the work, laboratory, and the funds. This is well essential. When we talk about the arts or painting, then we have several important names. Like here, I have a list of people. I can mention some of them. Like when we talk about the best painter, we come across Leonardo da Vinci. The Mona Lisa painting referred to him as the masterpiece. Then we have Picasso, Raja Ravi Verma, Salvador Dali, M.F. Hussein, Gustave, and Sandro Botticelli. These are some of the names in painting, those who have specialized. Not only science, that is specialization in any area that can give you the interest, and you can generate something, you can create something, you can discover something, you can investigate something. So that depends on your skill and your specialization and your interest. I now come to some of the basic points in the next slide. This is my telephone number and my email. In case of any query, you could mail me or you could call me sometime after the lecture, or if you have enough time, we can discuss the things right here. Now, you can read this slide very carefully, that a PhD degree is not a license for teaching only, but your experience will be enough to guide a research student, but in your own area, because you know better in your area than the others who are working in different areas. Like if you are an expert in spectroscopy, then the other person may not be as good in spectroscopy as you. And in spectroscopy, again, there are divisions like UV visible spectroscopy, NMR spectroscopy, Raman spectroscopy. So somebody picks up certain area depending on his interest and subject. If you are in physics, then you should be well aware of the Raman spectroscopy, which is named after C.V. Raman, who got the Nobel Prize sometime 1913 or 30. So here you have done at least PhD from a recognized institute in a given discipline. And therefore, you can do research, you can become a research guide. but you should have that much experience to guide the research, to make explanation, to make a hypothesis, and then to theorize it. Here, some of the prerequisites that have been laid down by some universities and also UGC, that you should hold a PhD degree from a recognized institute or a university. Much have enough experience. Enough experience has not been defined, but at least you should have 3 to 5 or 5 to 7 years experience as a teacher, or your duration during your own PhD can be counted as experience. And at least, according to the please do not talk among yourself. You can have enough time for discussion. Must hold a permanent position in any laboratory or in any college or university. It is always essential that you should have a permanent position in the university and should have enough experience as a PhD guide.
Sunil sir, please mute it.
You are doing it among yourselves. Can you please stop talking? Mute it.
सुनील सर म्यूट कर लो.
सुनील सर प्लीज म्यूट कर दीजिए अपने को.
सुनील सर सुनाई दे रहा है. सुनील सर
आपको सुनाई दे रहा है आपको?
जी सर.
जी सर.
यस सर.
Some of the points that is required to become a PhD guide are given in the slide. That we learn, we do work, and we learn what we do. Why don't you stop it, please? Then who is this who is doing it? This typing from home.
लगता है कुछ खोद रहे हैं.
अरे कुछ काट रहा है.
सर क्या खोद रहा है?
सर म्यूट योरसेल्फ.
सर रिसर्च चल रहा है.
जो इन्हें जानते
रिसर्च चल रहा है.
हैं उनसे कॉल करके कहा जाए म्यूट करने के लिए. अरे लेफ्ट कर दीजिए उनको.
कहीं पाकिस्तान जाने का सुरंग तो नहीं खोज रहे हैं.
Such candidate should be removed from the
नहीं
group.
रिसर्च
Please
को खोद के
remove.
डाल रहे हैं.
मजर भाई remove this person. ये फाइल खोद रहा है.
अब म्यूट हो गया. लेट अस कंटिन्यू सर.
प्लीज कंटिन्यू सर.
Continue, sir, please.
I think sir has gone to somewhere.
सर चले गए थे.
अच्छा डिस्टर्बेंस करेंगे तो क्या होगा? सर रहेंगे क्या?
जाने की बहुत जल्दी होती है.
Sir. Sir,
Yes. Some of you were talking, and it was so much disturbed that I could not even listen or I could not speak. Now, in this slide, I have to tell you that there are certain norms, certain rules which have been made by some colleges, universities, and even UGC. But the process of teaching and learning is a continuous process, as we know that as we teach, as we grow, we learn little more. So by doing things, sometimes we get something new, even in literature or in science. So all points that lead to research is honesty and to find out something new which has not been explored. So this can continue throughout our stay as teacher and as a research guide. So we should have, again, the same thing that has been put by UGC and some of the universities also. There are certain rules which are followed commonly by all, but there are certain rules which have been made by the universities and individual colleges. That knowledge of designing a PhD program, which may be completed in 3 to 4 years, which means that a research proposal should be made for your student so that you should be able to continue your work. And it should be such that it can be completed in 3 to 4 years' time. Sometimes the time exceeds, depending on some conditions which are unforeseen. But before that, we have to make a suitable title to the project. Suitable title means that you should be able to work on the project with time. That if you fix the time, you should make a program in such a way that it should be divided into certain sections. That this work, like finding out the literature, should be for 6 months or 1 year. Then the field work for 6 months to 10 months. Then collection of the data. Then doing work in the laboratory. Doing some calculations, statistics, etc. You should divide it into different sections and should be able to write the work in the thesis. A teacher should always be interested in doing something in the laboratory and in the subjects of arts like languages, political science, psychology, etc. There is need of experiment, and one should be able to operate the instrument also. Today, everybody can operate a computer, a laptop, a telephone, depending on the conditions in which he is interested. Are you interested in listening to music, or you are interested in finding out some scientific articles? So you can download, read them, and should have knowledge of computer also. And I hope everybody knows computer a little bit, at least to type it, to mail, to find out the current status of the subject in which you are working and the up-to-date knowledge in the subject. So if we are up to date, we can proceed from that. That is a point from which we proceed further, which means to a certain point, you should gain knowledge from the paper, from the book, and from the news, but it should be authentic. Authentic means you should have evidences to do it. Like, for example, today, there is a huge rush of people towards nanotechnology. Nanotechnology is an illegitimate child of everybody. Everybody is working in this area. Like computer science, they are doing simulations. The chemist, the physicist, the mathematics, environmental people, the biologists, biotechnologists, even engineering, everybody is working in this area to find out something new. When we collect these things together, we have a very strong finding which can be combined together to see that it is useful to the common people, it can reduce the cost, and it can increase its utility. So what is to be done, that we do the experiment, we find out the positive result and utilize it. Now, everybody will ask question that how many students can be guided by a teacher. Depending on the rank, it has been given certain numbers. That is, the maximum is 5 to 7 for a professor. But if you have a project, you can have a little benefit that you can be assigned a few more students in the project besides these numbers which are given you. But these numbers are based on the availability of the student and your availability as a guide and the condition in the laboratory or condition in your library, college or university. Because this quota is based on the availability. If you have project, everybody will want to work with you in the project so that it can be completed within a given span of time. But there is a condition that if you have a high teaching load, as in colleges, then you can spare very little time. So in order to save yourself, this number may be increased or decreased, depending on the condition that is laid down by the college. So you can have a few more students for you to work with for their PhD degree, or you can have a reduced number of students. There is another condition here, that what else can you have? You should have at least some publications in a reputed journal. Reputed journal means its circulation should be high, or you should have some patent. You should have presented some paper in symposia or conferences or in workshop. Or if you have written a book or a chapter in a book that shows your interest and your skill in research work and in writing articles. So a research guide should have experience of doing PhD program and also some project at the PG level. Generally in universities, in 4th semester, there is a project for the students to do in 3 or 4 months time or complete 1 semester. So that is a research experience for both the student and also the guide. Guide can help, the student can work in the laboratory. So it will be a help for those who are working, and it will be a help for those students also to gain knowledge and experience of doing work in the laboratory under the guidance of his teacher. Now, when you apply for becoming a research guide, then you should have all those qualifications which were laid down earlier, that you should have some published work and you qualify as a research guide because you should be able to know the subject and your expertise can be used to produce some work in that area. The additional qualifications are the discussion, experimental techniques, theoretical developments. Those, I would suggest that those who do not have much experimental facilities or laboratory which is much equipped should do theoretical work, especially in nuclear physics, nuclear chemistry, or simulation, or some DFT calculation, or determination of molecular structure on the basis of the calculation of the energies. Like if you choose a molecule, then you should calculate the energy of the bonds. Then you should be able to predict whether this is a stable molecule. And similarly, the need for that work is a good quality computer. You can do that with your calculation and the molecule that you choose. But practically, if you are working in the laboratory, you have a good lab or facility in some other lab to work, then you can go with that also. It is not essential that you do only theoretical work, but it's not supplemented by experimental evidences. So this approach of doing work in a laboratory is good enough. And for those who are interested in doing simulation or some work that is based on calculation and have a mathematical background, should be able to do this work in the department or in the college. Who can apply to become a research guide? It is the same thing that I have already shown you there, but one point that I did not give there is the plagiarism. Some people can define plagiarism as something that you steal from someone and don't say that you have stolen it. That is how to say an ace, not an ace, which means that you steal and then include your work and claim it as your own work. It is a plagiarism. But if you quote someone with a reference to support your work, it is not plagiarism, because you have declared that it is somebody else's work, somebody else's suggestion, and which is correct, and you have supported your work with his evidence. It is not plagiarism, but it should not exceed approximately 12 to 15% in some cases. In some cases, it's up to 30% that you can quote, but quoting must not exceed 30%. So plagiarism can be defined as something that is stolen without any reference and without giving any credit to that author. If you take the credit, it's a plagiarism. Limitation or number of students that I gave you earlier also, but here also depends on the subject, time, space, equipment, general facilities, and your teaching load. Teaching load means if you have such engagement in the college or in the university that you hardly find some time. If you have 3 to 5 classes daily, including your practical, then you will not be able to sit in the laboratory or in the room to do your research work. Because I know that personally, if you stay in the room, then you will be anxious about your classes, and you should have some time to prepare your lectures. You have to study and you have to deliver to the students. Because in that case, you have hardly some time to devote. The student alone cannot do that work because he is not an experienced person. So working facility and your engagements will decide that if you can devote your time to research and teaching together. This is what is we find in most of the colleges that are run by management. They hardly give you time to stay there. You are involved in extracurricular activities also. And the importance is given to those activities rather than to research, because the management does not want you to free. And whenever you are free, you will be caught by the principal and you will be involved in some other work, like preparing some chart, preparing timetable, and writing some work for the office, or preparing the mark sheet, preparing some journals, or to get involved in some functions. So time is an important factor. If you have enough time, then you can devote your time to think of it. And if you can think, you can imagine. When you imagine it, you can theorize it. When you can prove the theory, then it becomes part of your experiment. Now I can go further to show the involvement of the department. Allocation of the students that I gave you earlier in the previous slides, that it could be 1 to 3, 3 to 5, and 5 to 7. That is a number which is decided by the department or by the management of the college. So in universities, the separate departments have board of studies, which normally see how many students can be assigned to a teacher. Depending on the total number of the students who have applied, and depending on your expertise and the research facilities available in your department, in your area. Especially, I know that in biochemistry and chemistry and biotechnology, it takes much time to do the experiment because isolation of the compounds, especially organic compound, it's a difficult job. But in arts, in literature, you can go to library, find out the books, you can download papers, you can read them and find out your paper of interest. And a student can be then guided starting from that point. So the research interest of the both the guide and the student is important. If you are willing to do certain work in your area, then your student should be inclined to do that. But if there is a conflict, then the student can be assigned a different supervisor. Availability of a space in the department. That is, if you have a laboratory and common equipment, you can work there. Teaching load of the faculty, that depends on the number of classes that you hold, number of classes that you teach, and number of projects that you carry out, and the expertise in your area. If the student has qualified and getting a fellowship, it will be easy for you and the students together that he can support his expenses and also avail this facility in the department. There are certain things that is always dependent on the finances. So a fellowship is an important part of this research. Otherwise, it should be funded by the department. Eligibility criteria to become a research guide. This is the same that I have given you earlier also, that a teacher should be a permanent member in the department or in any university, should have published paper, at least 3 to 5 papers that is laid down by the university or the UGC. The rest of the things can be done in the department, provided you are interested in doing certain type of the work that can be extended to 3 to 5 years time. Besides that, the proposed number of PhD and MPhil students, here the MPhil and PhD have been divided into different categories. A professor can have 8. It was earlier divided that it should be 5 to 7. So these numbers are actually dependent on the availability of the time and the availability of the students, and also whether the student is admitted for MPhil degree or PhD degree. The number changes. Some people do only MPhil, some people do PhD, some people do MPhil and PhD together. But the conditions change from time to time. UGC had earlier laid down one condition that a research student should learn a foreign language other than English. It was a condition in the beginning, sometime in 1980s. Then it changed that instead of learning a language, we should do MPhil. So MPhil leading to PhD degree. So that was a prerequisite to do MPhil and then PhD in continuation. Now this condition is not valid today. You can do PhD directly. You can get admission and you can qualify for it. In case of women candidate, a relaxation is given. Transfer, extension, change of place, laboratory, maternity leave. These are some of the concessions that is given to the women candidate. But if they avail this time means it will be added and the time of PhD will increase. That is, if it is approximately 3 to 4 years, this time will be added from 3 to 5 years. That's why this concession is given only to women candidate and extension can be done. But there will be a difficulty when a teacher is transferred from one college to another college, or the supervisor changes from one place to another place. The difficulty arises that can be discussed in some other way. Now, subject and specialization. Here, we should have prior knowledge of the subject. Means, if I have specialized in certain area, then we should be able to work in that area, and we can also expand that area. It's not essential that we stick to it. We can learn something more and we can expand our area of research. Like, for example, if you are working on instruments, you can work on some other instruments also. If you are working in one area of the subject, you can expand your area because you need knowledge from others also. Now, we have this, I don't know exactly if you can see the imagination, hypothesis, and theory. I'll discuss it in detail. Experimentation means either you do the experiment and collect the data, or if you are doing some analysis, you should have data from other sources and analyze them. Like some calculation, like analytical calculation, and the results which are taken up by data only, that can be interpreted separately. But those experiments which are done in the lab, you can again interpret it in your own way, depending on the condition that which part is used. Like if you take certain curve, you can have the histogram, you can have a graph. Which one is easy to follow, you can choose and you can make a plot. But if you are collecting data from some other source, like population data in anthropology, then that can be also represented in the same way, depending on your interest in the subject. Either you are interested in interpretation of your result or interpretation of only the data. So interpretation should be meaningful. That can lead to theory, or you can modify it, or you can produce some new products. That is, from your experiment, you can produce something like a drug, cosmetic, or medicine. Here, presentation of data, where it can be significant or insignificant. It can be presented as graphical, or it can be in tabular form. Here, concept and controversy in research. Here, I will just give you an idea that how you proceed. Sometimes you dream of something that you had never thought of. About the dream, I would go to imagination. Imagination means, especially we stick to research. If we imagine something about our research, then sometimes people will laugh at you that you are thinking of something that is impossible. Like, for example, the first flyer was Icarus. He was not actually a flyer, but he imagined that he can fly like a bird. So what he thought is his imagination. What he practically did, Icarus took 2 cardboards, tied it to his shoulders, on both sides of his arm. And he saw the birds that they flatter their wings and fly in the sky. So he thought that if he does the same thing, he can fly. He flew from the rooftop. He jumped and flattering his both the arms in the way that the birds do. What happened to it? Icarus fell on the ground and he died. This was the first imagination that was brought to practice. But he perhaps did not think that his load was more than the air that he was displacing. There should be something to propel him upward instead of downward. The next experiment of flying was done by Wright brothers, Orville Wright and Wilbur Wright. They thought scientifically that if they make a machine that can have a propeller which can buoyance or pull upward so that it can fly like a bird. So they made a machine with a large fan which was propelled by air, and then they made this experiment in the field running on the ground. Next, they thought that they should fly. If it flies in the air, it can carry its weight also. They bought this experiment, they flew in the sky, they got down also. This was the successful experiment by Wright. So what they did, if they had not dreamed, they had not imagined, they could not prepare an aircraft. So that was imagination. And then hypothesis comes. Hypothesis is a word that is explained or defined as the proposal of something that is to be done. And later, it has to be proved by experiment, making observation, or by doing an experiment in the field or in the laboratory. If it is a successful experiment in the field or in the laboratory, it becomes theory. So we have a point-wise research to make imagination, then hypothesizes, make observation, prove it by experiment, then it becomes theory. And theory has been proved, which means you can follow and reproduce the same thing. Then a research or scientific approach is defined as the systematic investigation to know the facts. Science does not mean anything can be added to science, like political science. Politics is not a science, but is a systematic study in chronological order. So science is a word that is used for explanation in a systematic way. The next one, the research is not the analysis of data collected from various sources. That if you collect only the data to explain the past, what happened, but you have to find something new, or you add something new, or you produce something new, or you add or made modifications. Like if you do some experiment on animals, then the same can be applied to human subjects. It was given by Carl Pearson that in many cases we can find and we can use the science to produce medicine and make investigation to catch a criminal. How? That we take the fingerprint of the trillion peoples or innumerable number of the peoples. No two fingerprints are identical. This the nature has made. So science can be made for investigating criminals. and many cases can be solved. This is an observation that was done. Similarly, in DNA and RNA, that is also a sequence of the DNA that does not match with others. One sequence is different for one person. You can identify to whom it belongs. So such things we can do by doing research, and research can be classified into different titles. Innovative research, it can be a discovery, it can be extension of old work, or it can be an invention, it can be a patent, or it can be used to produce some medicine. We can discuss something in detail, showing that most available books on research methodologies describe the need of collecting information and techniques. Collection of techniques is not a proper word. It has been rendered obsolete, but collection of data from your own experiment. But those things in anthropology can be used to collect the data, to explain, and also to find out what can further be done. Like in agriculture, if you collect the data of the produce in the previous years, then you can further predict that how much production is to be increased to feed further people who are born later. So total number of the people is increased every year. And so is the case with the production of the crop, that it should also be increased. Here the data can be collected to explain and to produce the things scientifically. These observations can be made on the basis of the data which is available. But in scientific research, you produce something new and some addition is made. Like during these days, I would go to some of the examples that how to become a research guide, how to become a research supervisor, but we have to find out something new. The research means you have to honestly find the truth behind it. If you see a flower, a botanist or a biologist can tell you only that it's green, it has 5 petals, 5 sepals, is there 1 anther, and it's tied. While a person from arts and linguistics will explain that it's a beautiful flower, it has beautiful color, it has beautiful aroma, and dazzling color and aroma makes it attractive. If you ask a bee, the honey bee will see that it contains nectar. These are the types of the observation depending on your approach. Either this approach is physical, this approach is mental, or this is only to produce some material that you produce honey out of it, you produce aroma, or you just count the number of sepal and petals. So observation is very essential in your research. And to become a research guide, you have to make observation every time from your experimentation, and only for those who are interested in certain area of the research. I gave you the idea of working for your PhD degree as a research guide or a research supervisor, that when you start working, you should have answered to some questions of your own. The first one, the raison d'être. This is a French word which means the reason to do. Every time you start your work, you should have it in your mind that why am I doing it? Why it is useful? Why should I do it? When you start working, then you should know that you have knowledge of the subject you want to find out something out of it. And you can produce something like a drug, or you can produce some crop, or you can produce some knowledge to disseminate among your colleagues and your schools. Why one should take up a research project? This question arises again, that why should you take up research project? You can do research in your area if you have knowledge, and knowledge comes from your observation, from your study, and from your teaching. When students always ask you questions, then you find the answer. Sometimes they make their own observation and ask you whether it is correct. And you have to tell them that this is correct or incorrect if you have knowledge in the subject concerned. Then where the work is to be done? Either the work is to be done in the laboratory or in the field. Field work means geography, geology, and some other technological work can be done in the field, even in agriculture and some part of the biotechnology, that the people have to work in the field to find out the crops, the area to be irrigated, and the area is fit for certain crops which can be grown there. It is always dependent on the conditions, whether it is feasible. The next is the place and facility available. If you are working individually in the laboratory, then you should have a good equipped laboratory with instruments. And a teacher on both the students should be able to operate the instruments and how to maneuver it from one graph, from one experiment. You should be able to explain many things. Like, for example, if you run the spectrum of something, or if you make a plot of the population year-wise, then you should be able to explain that in this year the population was this much in this area, which is barren, and population in certain other area, which is always thickly populated, was reduced. So this observation, when divided into various factors, keeping in mind, you can explain the things. Explanation means you made observation and now you are explaining it in your terms. So this is dependent on your facility in the subject concerned, and in science, you should have some instrument, especially computer. Does this research add something to the existing knowledge in the subject? Because this question always arises, that what you have done. If you have done something positive, you produce something and something new, which can be added to the existing knowledge in the subject, then you have done something. But if you just copied it, you repeated it, and then produced it before the audience, before your faculty, or before the university, then it may not be acceptable. So a thesis or a project, when written nicely, keeping in mind the objective, the aims, your expertise, and the available facility in your institution. So that will be useful in doing the research, and also the type of the research. Here I would give you the category of the research. Some of the researches that we do is fundamental research or purely academic research. That is for finding out the modification in the theory, or finding out some new experiment that can produce some new information and add to the knowledge of the subject. Then we have applied research. Applied research, sometimes you can also say industrial research, or engineering type research, or biotechnological research. This applied research is mainly useful in easing the things for industries, like production of wax or candles, production of a machine production of a cosmetic, reducing the cost of the cosmetics, and something that you can produce. Like, for example, today, the nanotechnology is being used for reducing the cost and increasing the surface area. So if you have some work in the applied research or applied areas, then it is called sometimes industrial research. That can increase the production, that can bring something new. Like the that you generally apply, the sunscreen lotion. It is a cosmetic, but it can be produced, it can be used by common people when its cost is very low. What is this sunscreen lotion? It's an ordinary cream with 0.1% zinc oxide. So there is nothing very important. It is only zinc oxide that is mixed with the cream, which absorbs the ultraviolet light and protects your skin from damage. So this applied research has produced this cream and it has reduced the cost. So applied research is one area which can produce large scale substances like paints, cosmetics, and medicines, and reduce the cost so that it can be afforded by common people. Then the third one is the field research. Field research, as you know, that it is always research in large scale. Like some experiments in botany are done in the pots on plants, but that result is not exactly equal to the result which is done in agronomy or in agriculture in large scale. In the field, the production is large. In the laboratory, we have everything which has been refined. Even the distilled water is used, but for irrigation, we do not have distilled water. Even for drinking, the distilled water is not used. So it cannot be corroborated to explain that the laboratory work in agriculture or in agronomy will be equal to the field research, but field research will produce something different on large scale. Even in geology, we cannot do work only in the laboratory. We can do analysis in the laboratory, but the samples that are to be collected from different areas, one has to go in the field and collect it. Then how to write a research paper? As you know all, that summary of the work and introduction, all these things are done. How to write? You don't have to write the abstract or summary in the beginning. You have to write the introduction. Or even before that, you can write the material and methods, although it comes at the third place. Material and method, because that you have used. Which material did you use? Which substances did you use? And which methods did you use? Because you know that and you can write it and collect that. Then you write the introduction. Introduction means what information you have collected from the sources of books, from the experiment, from the library, and previous work that has been done in that area. So that will explain why did you choose the problem and how you approached. Your introduction will explain the work in brief and your objective. Why did you pick up this project? Then it comes to results and discussion, where you explain your results and discuss it in terms of your finding, that your data is supported by this result and similar result had been obtained from other places also. Then you finally conclude that what conclusion you draw from your work. Either it can be used for producing something, or it is an academic research that can be added to the knowledge and in the textbook that it has been found recently. Like, for example, there are certain changes in the oxygen now. Recently, a Nobel Prize was given to one chemist who found that oxygen has one more isotope, oxygen 28, that is heavier than the oxygen available. So this is a finding that has been shown experimentally, although it's not very stable. But you conclude that you have done this experiment, you have found it, and finally you show that it can be used for development of some other things. Like your research, if it is experimental research, then it will be a standard operating procedure which can be used by others and reproduced. Finally, if it is a work that has been supported by the university, then you have to make recommendations. And if it is something that it involves large finances and you want to patent it, then this patent will be a credit to you and to the college or the university as a whole. It's a great honor. Writing a research proposal, I would just come briefly to it. Aims and objectives. That is how you have a research proposal to present. Either you apply for funds or even if you are working on it on your own. So you should mention you have chosen this research. Make a title, write down the methods that you use, the approximate time that it would take. Maybe it is 3 to 4 years or about 5 years. Budget and finances means when you apply for a project for funds, then you have to also mention that per year how much money you need and how many people will work on this project, either a research student or a technician. So you should calculate the whole finance as payment for the salary of those people or a fellowship. This is to be done in the beginning. And a research proposal should have these qualifications. That is, if you are doing it, then it should be within your expertise. Or if you are doing it jointly with someone, then he should also share the same thing together that you are jointly doing it because this facility is available there. It should be unique. Unique means it should be different from what has been done so that it could be important to both of you in order to get a PhD degree, and also it can be used as a part of any theoretical consideration. It may develop SOPs, standard operating procedures. That is, your method can be reproduced. So it should be so important. It can be quoted elsewhere or it can be patented too. Now, there are some conditions that I have already explained to you, that for finances and the number of students, allocation of the students, and the problems, sometimes the Board of Studies and the department are involved. The equal involvement of the teacher is always essential. That the Board of Studies fixes the quota. 1 to 3, 3 to 5, 5 to 7, or 8. That also depends on the number of students and the teacher and his availability in the laboratory or in the institute. So that it can be done. I have shown you here some laboratory here to work with. That it should be clean, the facility should be available, and you should have also an exit. In case of any accident, you should be able to flee from the laboratory from the back door. And precaution should be made. If you are working in the laboratory, you should be equipped with all the filters, all the glasses, and gloves so that you are protected well. But in a common laboratory where most of the chemicals are benign and you are working with only water and alcohol, even then you are exposed to it and should avoid the fire. This is one of the laboratories that I have shown to you to see that it is a suitable place to work. This is the university gate, Aligarh Muslim University entrance. And it's a great seat of learning. If you have any occasion to come to this place, you can see that how the people are working in this university in different departments, even in law, agriculture, psychology, and science, engineering, and medical college. This is the great mosque in the university, and we are proud of it. And finally, I thank you for your patience and wish you a good day, and your success is my approach to you to explain whatever I knew I have presented to you. If you have any questions, please continue with that.
Thank you, sir.
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 It was a very nice presentation.
Thank you, sir.
I have a question.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
I have a question, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Please, one by one.
Thank you, sir.
One by one.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Sir, as you
Thank you, sir.
told that the laboratory conditions are. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Excuse me, sir.
Please.
Sir,
Thank
as you
you,
have
sir.
told that the laboratory conditions are different from the real field conditions. So, sir, is there any way that we can show that our method is applicable for the real samples, so that it can increase the weightage of our work?
Depends on your subject. What is your subject?
Okay. Chemistry, sir. Chemistry only.
Chemistry. Where are you working now?
I am working as Dhanodi PG College, sir, Haridwar.
Haridwar.
Like, sir, real samples for water and all, we can work to see that how much the level of contamination is there. So I think it will be useful.
I hope you have a good laboratory there in Uttarakhand, and you must be available all the facilities there. But in case you need something that can be done in any other laboratory on payment, you can apply for it and the facility will be provided to you. Or if you personally join that institution, you can do it on.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Hello. Like, for example, scanning electron microscopy is available in Jamia Millia Islamia and Aligarh Muslim University. So you can do for nanoparticles or for any other agricultural or botanical samples.
Yeah.
This facility is available here.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Anybody else?
Excuse me, sir.
Please.
My question is related to the ethics of research, and the question is: do we really perform or do a research work?
Please be allowed.
Do we really
Your voice
perform a research work?
Your voice is very weak. Please speak a little bit louder.
Sorry, sir.
Louder, please.
Sir, my question is related to the ethics of research. The question is: do we really perform a research work?
Louder, please.
Do we really perform a research work?
Who?
We, all the professors are throughout India.